Great. Hello. Thank you, Lindsay, for having me. It has been really exciting to exhibit with you, and I'm excited to be meeting everyone here virtually. And thank you for also being flexible and meeting with us later through the exhibition here in this space. My name is April Werle. I'm a narrative painter and use my practice to tell stories about cultural identity, focusing on themes of mixed race identity, family, and belonging. I'm really interested in how culture is passed down in the Filipino diaspora and within multicultural families and communities. Because storytelling is really the core of how I go about creating a show, I wanted to share a little story with you. So, Secret Life of a Multicultural Couple really started years ago. And when I think back to pinpoint where it started, several conversations come to mind. There's a student group in Missoula, Montana called Pacific Islander Club, and they are fantastic about bringing the community together, whether you are AAPI or non-AAPI. But one day I was at their potluck and was talking to a friend that I've known for years. This friend is a bit of a workaholic and always on the go, so most of our conversations are catching up and usually pretty quick. But as they were going out the door, they told me that they had just broken up with their partner. I immediately began attempting to console them, but was curious why they seemed pretty emotionally unbothered. It turns out that they hadn't been dating for very long, but I was surprised to hear their reasoning for breaking up. It wasn't because they were too busy, but they said they really wanted to end that relationship to pursue dating someone of their own ethnicity. That statement really stuck with me. I began noticing this discussion come up more and more in other spaces. I had another friend who at the time had just gotten married to their significant other, and they told me that they and their partner had never previously dated someone of their own ethnicity. They said that they and their partner were both pleasantly surprised when they began dating because it felt easier in many ways. For the first time, they didn't need to explain cultural habits, mannerisms, or thought patterns to their partner. They had an unspoken understanding of each other in a way they hadn't experienced in multicultural relationships before. Another friend told me they had already given up on passing culture down to their children. They expressed that their children would be mixed and felt that teaching them language and culture just wouldn't stick. All of these interactions were happening pretty shortly after I first began making a concerted effort into reconnecting with my cultural heritage. As the discourse increased, I felt insecure. Was I missing out on something? Was it internalized racism to date someone outside of my race? But what about dating as a mixed race person? Would dating inside my race mean dating someone that is my exact mix? I was confused. From all of these conversations, I found myself wondering, is it possible to thrive in my cultural identity and be in a mixed race relationship? I was already in a happy and loving relationship and didn't want to let this question influence me to the point where I potentially ruined my relationship with my non-Filipino partner. I was unsatisfied with the notion that I needed to date a Filipino person to feel complete. I decided that to satisfy the need of having a home and a relationship that fostered my cultural identity, that I would need to find a way to bring my non-Filipino partner into my culture. As I continued to reconnect with my cultural roots, I worked on finding small and easy ways to share culture in the home. The paintings in Secret Life of a Multicultural Couple are moments that I've pinpointed that felt significant in the process of learning to share culture with my partner. The first painting I sketched was I'll Save the Forks for You, which came from a moment of simply observing. My partner and I were making dinner. Each of our plates were full of rice, lumpia, and salad, a staple meal of ours. He ate his with a fork, and as an effort to come back to myself in a cultural way, I started eating with my hands again. I took a mental screenshot and thought, this would be a great place to start this exhibition. The next painting I sketched out was Come on in and pop your shoes off, which was based on the moment I heard my partner invite a friend into the house, and I was shocked and proud. About a year into our relationship, I had worked up the courage to ask if we could be a shoeless home, and it had taken many conversations to make this a shared effort in asking our guests to take their shoes off. Then came Use This to Wash Up, which was actually first titled Here, this is like a Filipino bidet. I have no idea if my partner uses the tabo, but one day I saw muddy footprints all over our bathroom, and I realized our cat had found the tabo in the shower and commandeered it as his watering bowl. So our cat emoji is effectively Filipino. This is how you measure rice was the next piece I sketched out. Although this piece is probably the most tender out of all of them, it is the funniest to me because my partner actually makes rice better than I do and reminds me of it constantly. It actually low-key makes me super proud of him. I'm not saying my culture is better than yours. Came about when I realized how flat the exhibition was, with only funny and tender moments. I realized that I had avoided telling stories of conflict in this exhibition, which I realized were important to truly assess the dynamic of sharing culture in a relationship. With care, I approached my partner and asked if it was okay to share these moments too. Then came, "You have to eat vegetables," which is more on the humorous side, but was inspired by the many times I've heard that there aren't vegetables in Filipino food, as I'm literally cooking vegetables. I'm still trying to figure out this discernment here. But "you're white too" is a statement I've heard many times by many people, primarily in intimate moments of conflict. And it is true, I am white too. And I'm still trying to figure out how being mixed brings me closer to and separates me from others. And "does this bother you" is inspired by the insecurity I experience when I eat with my hands in front of others that don't eat this way. Although my partner is unbothered by it, I still feel nervous about it. And "we can send money home" was a title I had planned early on, but was the last piece that I sketched out. It is inspired by our recent trip to the Philippines. It was the first time that I ever brought a partner to meet my family there. As always, it was an incredible visit, but it was the first time as a full-fledged adult. I confronted a lot of realizations on what it is to be an overseas Filipino woman. I felt myself stepping into my mother's shoes in many ways, and at the end of the trip had a meltdown. My partner was there witnessing it and holding me as I sobbed. In that moment, I realized that I had never let anyone see this part of my life before. Through creating this show, I had some unexpected realizations, like the moments of conflict were made humorous by seeing hands arguing with each other. Many of these moments mirror my own internal struggles with mixed race identity. Many of the paintings can be interpreted as my Filipino self and white self navigating culture together. And then I found myself answering the question that started this exhibition in the first place. Is it possible to thrive in my cultural identity and be in a mixed race relationship? And the answer was yes. What I learned from recounting these moments is that I'm not missing out on anything. My partner can share in my culture without being of my ethnicity, and cultural differences are not a barrier to a loving and supportive relationship. Thriving in my cultural identity starts from within, but it is also nurtured by loved ones who make space to understand and participate in my heritage. Well, thank you again, Lindsay and Phil Projects, for having me. Here is my contact info, my website, my email, and my Instagram.
Yay, thanks, April. Thank you for sharing that. I want to start by asking a couple questions and have our audience just think about questions that they might want to ask as well. First of all, I think since I'm at the gallery throughout this exhibition every day, a lot of the questions that I've been getting are about your just technical process of painting. And a lot of the observations have been related to like thinking or, I guess perceiving the paintings as kind of a collage. So I wanted to ask you if you could explain just the kind of technical process of making these and what you had mentioned in your presentation just now about sketching them out, just how that starts, where the idea comes for the composition, and how it results in the paintings that we see in the exhibition.
Yeah, so my process really starts out with an overall like question or thesis that I'm interested in exploring. And I spend months of just writing and thumbnailing. And usually I start with a title, and those titles shift too as the paintings develop. But I curate the exhibition beforehand before I start working on the paintings. And so my process, like physically, I stain. I do a whitewash stain and a pecan stain, and that is metaphorical in some ways. And and then I do a layer of gack on that to keep the stains safe. And I mask everything off and sketch, and then I first paint the hands, and then I work. I think it's front to back with the backgrounds so that there is a bit of relief on the wood that makes people think that it's collage, but it's actually just the relief of the paint that's built up on top of the surface.
And one of the other comments that I think is interesting that people have said is you're really not shying away from the hands as your main subject, which for painters is sometimes, the bane of their existence. It's a hard thing to master, and you've done so beautifully with all of these paintings. Can you talk a little bit more about the choice of including hands in your paintings?
Yeah, so I've been hearing that a lot lately, and it was never a thought because hands were one of the first things that I learned how to draw. But my interest in hands stems from like some of my first memories. My mom always complimented my hands and said that she kind of like winked and said that I have her hands. And I also remember I grew up in the church, and I remember it was like some of the only times that I saw my Auntie Esther, and she's quite a bit older than my mom. And I always thought like the texture of her hands was really interesting. So I started using hands as a kid, like through the encouragement of my mom, to tell stories and like make cards for family members. And then for a long time, I stopped painting hands, and I didn't come back to them as a subject matter until after school. Um, in college, I was using the full figure to tell stories, but I was looking for a way to remove some of the context that you get from like specifically a face and an entire body.
Yeah, I think it's really unique, and it does that sort of storytelling thing that you were talking about really effectively. And yeah, removing specific subjects, but then you're able to still, place the viewer in there because we all, use our hands in different ways. I want to open it up quickly to our guests that are with us. If there are any questions, you can feel free to ask, on camera or put it in the chat. There is one question in the chat that I will read right now. It says, April, when you create a series or topic for a show, how do you come up with the subject or stories you tell?
Yeah, so far, all of my solo shows have been this process of reconnecting with my cultural identity. And they've gradually transitioned into exploring what it is to be mixed race, because I feel like that is an under-discussed topic and something that I've had my whole life to think about what being a Filipino and a Filipino American is. But I think that I really neglected thinking about what it means to be mixed race because I was trying so hard to fit into one box, or I was specifically put in one box. So my first solo show was about reconnecting with my culture through spirituality and folklore, and then that naturally shifted into just kind of touching the surface on being mixed race, and then that transitioned into realizing that I needed to explore this dynamic with my partner in the home that we're creating. And when I'm thinking about fostering my own cultural identity and potentially fostering cultural identity within our children. So my shows are a reflection of where I'm at, and big ticket items in terms of like show, uh, like cultural identity to mixed race identity to mixed race relationships. And I'm not sure exactly. I think that I'm delving more into, I think there's a lot more to explore in terms of mixed race identity, and that's where my work is going. But the mini stories within the bigger story of the exhibition um, take a lot of time, and I'm looking for like little moments that tell like a bigger story that fit within the scope of like the thesis I'm capturing with the exhibition. But
Thank you.
mostly their memories.
Yeah. I mean, it is a marker in time in a way, anything that you're creating as an artist and the things that you're kind of thinking about in that moment. So I really like that explanation. That's really enlightening. Um, I think with that being said, living every day, kind of negotiating this, not only your upbringing and your past and who you are as an individual, but your relationship now. But then also then like diving even deeper by creating these paintings. I'm sure it's kind of like a discovery process. I don't know if you could like talk a little bit about that. If there was one painting in particular that was like, in, either like a really joyful thing to create, or you learned a lot from creating one painting or another. If you could tell us anything about that.
Yeah, I think that I usually have a couple pieces that in an exhibition that really stand out to me that I have an emotional experience with while I'm painting. And I think the three that really stood out to me in this show, This Is How You Measure Rice. Like I know when it's a good one because I get really teary-eyed.
Mhm.
That one I like really fell in love with it really early on in the process. And I think like I was feeling really tender emotions, and I think that comes across in that painting. Um, and then We Can Send Money Home.
Mhm.
That piece, I was really nervous about sharing that piece because it I feel like it can be interpreted as white saviorism. And with the way that the hands are positioned and the title. Um, but that moment was based off a really specific memory, and it wasn't about my partner making the situation better for me. It was more about realizing that I felt comfortable to let him see that part of me, um, which was really impactful for me. I literally cry every time.
I'm
Um,
sorry. I know it's really heavy, and I think as an artist, any work that you make is really vulnerable, and I know that this is really vulnerable work. So I'm sorry, April. I appreciate you sharing.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
No, I think it's usually a good sign for me.
yeah,
It's like how I measure if I'm saying like what I should be saying.
yeah.
Um, and then the third one is But You're White Too. Which I think like when I was sketching that out, that felt in a lot of ways like a very dark painting, and it is actually like it's the most black I've ever used in a painting. Um, but after I finish that painting, I find it just so comical. And like I think that was a good reflection of the many ways that creating this exhibition was helpful for me in thinking about the moments of conflict in a mixed race relationship and the disconnects. But I think making the show and talking about it, I realized that conflicts are common or are in every single relationship, whether it's romantic or not. And the fact that I'm here painting it means that I feel safe talking about it, and that it like doesn't have like this really negative weight to it.
Let's see, there's another question in our chat. How much work goes into finding materials to produce your art, or to reproduce it into different formats like cards, stickers, and prints?
Oh, okay. So I wouldn't say that I spend much time gathering uh materials for my paintings. Like I purchase the panels, I don't make them anymore. And then I just use like store-bought paint. And then um as when I was starting out, I was really trying to make my work as accessible as possible. And so I started making stickers, and I just used like a big sticker company. And then I started doing greeting cards as a way for people to share my work accessibly. But now with prints, I'm really trying to trying to work with a local company that um, like has like makes beautiful prints, because I don't want someone to hang something. I don't want my work to be on something that doesn't reflect the time that it took. And I think that someone that wants one of my pieces but chooses to purchase a print, I want it to look and feel really nice, that it feels like something that they've collected, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important with prints, but also making it as accessible as possible. That's really important too.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other questions from our guests with us today? Or comments, observations? So there's another question. I can read it out loud. Do you have any advice for anyone who is in a multicultural relationship?
Um, I think that I think it's so different for everyone. But putting the time and effort into just like the basics, like learning a couple words, if that's something that your partner practices, if they practice language, to learn some of the language. Um, I think what's really helpful and something that I've heard from other family members and that I've done myself with my own cultural heritage, is reading books by your partners, like by the ethnicity of your partner. Um, I think that that is such a good way to understand cultural viewpoints. And that might not even, there might be like something small that you suddenly understand about your partner by reading a book about that's like written about their cultural heritage. Um, and I think like food obviously is a great way to share culture. And I think like for me, that was where I started with my partner. Was just my mom makes us lumpia, and she sends us like big old Ziplocs full. And thankfully, I've never had a friend or a partner that has not liked lumpia. I think that would be my test. And eating rice, I think for a lot of cultures eat rice for most meals. And so, like, just learning how to do those things, I think, like, with this is how you measure rice, going back to that with my partner. Um, he makes rice most of the time for us, and that's such a small way that makes me feel loved.
I love that. That's really sweet. Let's see. Another question in the chat is, were your hand models patient?
No. No, that honestly, it caused a lot of like little arguments. Because my wrists, like, I don't know if it's like a gender thing or like when you think of like women like being able to bend their wrists, you know. My partner's wrist does not bend in the way that I want them to. So I had like for like to go back to this is how you measure rice. Like in my sketch, I had like a very specific angle because like his hand is pointing down into the rice bowl, yeah, and in the rice pot, and we just could not get his wrist to bend that way. So like there was like some finagling that I had to do when I was finding the right position for the hands. But primarily it was that. And I think like it's always important to be nice to your models if you want them to model for you again.
And then, so are you taking reference pictures and then painting from that?
Yeah, so I go outside, or if the lighting's not really good, I like set up my lights in my studio for the for the right angle so that the light is consistent in the painting. And then I'll take like 20 photos and then just like go through them and see if I got what I wanted. Sometimes it will take up to 3 different sessions of taking reference photos. Um, and then sometimes I'll like get something, do the other hand, and it's just not the right conversation that I'm looking for. And so then I have to go back and take more photos.
Yeah.
So the photo references is a long process.
So a lot of patience, in other words.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, I mean, what an amazing process, and yeah, a lot of time and tedious, meticulous detail. I love that.
Yeah. I'm like trying to figure out how I really liked it was the first time that I painted someone else's hands in my work. And I really enjoyed painting the different angles in my partner's hands, and I'm looking for ways to like potentially use that as a background character in some of the other narratives that I'm doing.
Nice. There's another comment. This has been a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Have you grown through your artwork as an artist and personally?
Yeah, I think that is it have I or how have I?
How have you grown through your artwork as an artist or personally?
Okay. I think that the biggest thing that I've noticed once I started using my art practice to think about cultural identity is that I've found a lot of security in how I identify, which has helped me feel a stronger sense of belonging, which is something that I grew up really struggling with. Um, and then what was the other part of that question?
Um, and then, so that's how you've grown personally. How have you grown as an artist as well?
Yeah, what's been interesting is I work in a way that the painting process I probably work on for about 2/3 of the year. And then the other third of the year, I'm just writing and reflecting and planning. And I think I have been surprised to see like each show that I work on, like my skills progress, even though I'm taking like this long break in between. And I think I attribute that to I'm looking at a lot of other people's work. One of my favorite magazines is New American Paintings. And I'm pretty sure that that book alone has like helped me think about the way that I paint more critically.
Awesome. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? Anything else that you would like to share, April?
Um, I'm just really grateful to not only show my work in Denver, but also get the opportunity to take my work outside of Montana. Because that's a really important piece of my practice is reaching people in communities, especially in places that is like not a large cultural hub in terms of like the Filipino community. Because I think that these stories are really needed and pertinent in places that we don't see ourselves outside every day. So I just feel really grateful to be showing with you, and it's been a really great experience. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Well, I think with that, we will probably wrap it up unless there are any other quick questions that anybody wants to ask, either in the chat or, if you want to ask them out loud, live. Otherwise, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. April's exhibition, Secret Life of a Multicultural Couple, is on view through this Sunday. So if you are in Denver and haven't seen it yet or want to see it again, please come by. We are located on 17th Avenue facing City Park. And it's just a really great exhibition. I want as many people to see it as possible for the reasons you had just mentioned, April. I think it's such important work, and to be able to share that narrative and to do that storytelling is just I feel very privileged to be able to share that or be part of that sharing here at the gallery. I think with that, I'm gonna say goodbye and thank you so much. Thank you, April. Thank you, everyone, again for being here. And yeah, we'll see you all soon, hopefully.
Yeah. Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.